I'm a big fan of control. The truth is, whether you put any stock in the Enneagram or not, I relate to that number 8. That's the one that fears loss of control, desires justice, wants everything to be right and orderly. I originally hated that number more than any of them because it can often be a bully, and I didn't like that. And I don't like that tendency sometimes for my own nature to go a little bit too far in that direction. And there's a weird spectrum for this number. One end of the spectrum of your Enneagram 8 is Martin Luther King Jr., and on the other end is Donald Trump. So there's a range of how this driving desire for control and this fear of loss of control can end up. And I'm a work in progress when it comes to my desire for control, so I am looking forward to this conversation that we are about to have. Today's guest is sharing about control, reactivity, and allegiance to Jesus. Brian Sturtz is the director of spiritual care for a home health and hospice company in Oklahoma. He spent 7 years as a trauma chaplain at a level 1 trauma hospital and 23 years as a church minister. He will help us talk about these very important matters today. Our culture runs on values contrary to Christ. We're surrounded by a million voices competing for our attention. Even in our own churches, sometimes our eyes aren't firmly on Jesus. So one question remains: who or what do you truly worship? Welcome to the Smashing Idols podcast. I'm Jake Doberenz, and this is your call to break free from the things that pull you away from Jesus Christ. Each week I chat with theologians, ministers, cultural thinkers, and everyday believers to uncover how modern idols sneak into our lives and how we can smash them to pieces. We're not here for surface-level faith. We're here to dig deep, challenge the norms, rediscover what it means to follow Jesus with everything we've got. So if you're ready to kick distractions to the curb and embrace a faith worth living, you've come to the right place. And hey, don't forget to check out jakedoberenz.com/podcast to catch every episode and subscribe to the newsletter. So, you ready? Let's start smashing those idols. Well, Brian, thanks so much for hopping on.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Now, did you say this is your first time on a podcast?
Yeah, I never done the podcast thing before. When I was doing church ministry during COVID, made a lot of videos for Sunday, but never did the podcast. So, give it a shot.
It's off your bucket list now. Beautiful.
I can now go in peace.
Okay, well.
Made it onto a podcast. All right.
Okay, well, you're a hospice chaplain, so.
That's right.
You know all about that. So we'll go ahead and just jump in because, Brian, you had an experience where you learned about reactivity in a chaplain training class when you were questioned for what seemed like forever over asking a patient if there was anything you could do for them. What did you take away about reactivity in that moment?
Yeah, so one of the trainings that chaplains go through is a thing called CPE. It stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. And clinical pastoral education can be really grinding because your fellow chaplains that you're going through CPE with, at first they kind of feel like adversaries because they really dig into a lot of the ways in which we try to protect ourselves. So for myself, sometimes, you would try to be like super chaplain. Well, in doing that, that's really just a defense mechanism to really, like to your issue, to try to control. I'm trying to come across like I've got it all organized. I know all these answers. I'll do my paperwork just right, all these kind of things. But really, sometimes that's just trying to cover up the fact that I feel really insecure or I don't have all the answers. And so in one of my very first classes, we had to do what's called a verbatim. And a verbatim is just a word, like line by line, description of conversations you had with the patient. And during that conversation, I'd asked this patient, I said, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And my CPE supervisor was like, "So what do you mean by that when you said that?" I was like, "Well, what are we talking about?" He's like, "Well, here's this patient. They're lying in a hospital bed. They're dying. What are you going to do? What exactly are you going to do for them? How are you going to help them? What are you going to do?" And I was like, anyway, that turned into a very long discussion about how I have, and I think a lot of us have, sometimes this need to help, or I'm going to fix it. What can I do to fix and take away maybe the pain, or take away the anxiety, or lower the temperature in the room, or get you to think differently. I'm going to try to fix this, which is another form of control. And so, oh man, it felt like forever during that, because I'd never really had that experience. I would call that something that maybe the church could definitely learn from, that kind of experience. Because up until then, as a church minister, I never really had anybody pick apart like me and my motives or my understandings of things. Usually we just use a lot of very pietistic sounding terms, God's got it. Oh, okay. What does that even mean? What are we talking about? And I think a lot of times that's just another form of like control, where we're scared of how things are really going to go. And instead of just saying, "I'm scared," or "I'm confused," or "I doubt," "I've got some questions about that," we just say some pietistic things. We're not really sure what any of it means. And so in that situation, I'm sitting there trying to explain why I said, "Hey, is there anything else I can do for you or to help you?" And really what I had learned up until then is, oh, that's just me trying to control the situation. And that was a learning point for me, was coming to that understanding of just the ways in which we try to control ourselves, other people. And it led me into a discovery of a lot of systematic thinking about how groups, be it a congregation at a church or a group at a company, are all really truly emotional systems. And all of those systems are in various forms of flux, like all the time. And so that got me into really studying that. Like, why are you saying that? Why do I think I got to control this thing? So it got me into a lot of that.
So what does that word reactivity mean? I mean, can you kind of give us a little definition for what we're supposed to think about?
Sure. I'll do the best I can. I would probably say most of us don't think of ourselves as reactive. Like, we're not walking around, on eggshells. If somebody were to say, "How you're doing?" we're like, "Hi." Like that's usually not what we do. But reactivity can take a lot of different forms. Reactivity could show up as you're in a meeting, you tell a dad joke and it bombs, and now you feel a certain kind of way about it. You're not, you feel a little weird, you feel a little awkward, about it. You walk into a room where maybe you haven't been in this room before. Maybe there's some people that you just don't know. So maybe you walk in with a sense of feel a little awkward, feel a little weird about this. That's reactivity. You're at church and somebody walks up to you and they say something like, "Hey, so how's your how's the prayer life?" And you get really nervous and you're not really sure how to answer. And so you say things like, "Oh, I've been praying, I've been doing some things," and you just say a bunch of stuff, whether or not you really mean it, but we just say some things because we get really anxious. And so there are 4 areas where reactivity shows up. It shows up inside of us. It shows up between me and another person, and it can show up inside of other people, and it can show up between other people. Those are the 4 main areas in which reactivity shows up. And it can have a lot of different kind of flavors to it. But most of us probably wouldn't necessarily know we're reactive when we're being reactive. Like a parent finds out that their kid is on the bike and they're outside riding the bike on the road. and they run outside and they're yelling at their kid, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, get in the house, you can get hit by a car. All that's true. And I'm not saying that reaction is horrible, but included in that reaction is the anxiety inside myself that, oh my gosh, I am a horrible parent. How did my kid get outside and on a bike in the road? Oh my God. It's the reactivity we experience when you show up to school and all the other kids are like, their hair is all combed and, their clothes are nice. And then your kid's there with like their hair all done up and you, I don't know, threw some chips in a Ziploc bag and that's fun, because it's what you could get done that day and you feel a little weird about that. That's reactivity. And when we're feeling reactive, we're not thinking. We're just reacting. And when we're reacting, we often make quick decisions. What's going to alleviate the pain? So we say what we have to say to get through the situation, or do what we have to do to get through the situation. But we're not really engaged. We're not really present. We're somewhere else. We're trying to protect our persona. We're trying to project our image of what we want that other person to think of us, which is another way to try to control that.
Well, thank you for that clarification. That is very helpful. And a lot of the scenarios that you mentioned are very relatable. Not a parent, but I can relate to those feelings of anxiety, that wanting to control aspects of how things are going to make me not look always like the odd man out or the one that doesn't have all the control. Boy,
yeah, totally.
Relatable.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All the time. And anxiety can become chronic. There are some people who are in it for the conflict. And when you're in it for the conflict, you begin to believe that conflict is just normal. Like this is just how it's supposed to be. And so you see that in our wider culture, right? Like everything in our culture is built around conflict. It's us versus them, right? Like social media, all the political stuff that we see, it's all us versus them. And then everybody it's just everybody reacting to what everybody else said. Somebody said this, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that. And then it's blah, 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 blah. And then I can't believe they said that. Blah, 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 blah. And so it's just a bunch of reactivity. And when you're just reacting, you're not thinking. There's, this and this are not engaged. We're just reacting. We're just, we might as well just be, I don't know, just yelling at each other all the time, which look at our culture, that's pretty highly effective, isn't it? You can get a lot done with that. Not. And so it's just not helpful doing that kind of thing. I would say, at least in the spiritual side of things, or at least a theological thing that can help with that is, I believe that there's a lot of ancient people that weren't stupid. And I think that they had a lot of things figured out that even today, we seem a little clueless about. And one of those areas is like the word, is like peace. So in the Bible, peace is a word related to the word whole or wholeness. And so peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is what it means to be a whole person. And so when reactivity is in our lives and in our cultures, in our families, then we tend to be very fragmented people. Like imagine if I was holding a blanket, and if I took all the little threads out of that blanket, I don't have anything meaningful anymore. I just got a pile of thread. And if I looked at that and I was like, oh, look, here's my blanket, and I picked up a bunch of thread, well, there's nothing really, it's just a bunch of thread, right? It's when we weave all of that back together to make a whole, a blanket. Oh, now I know what that is. So in the Bible, when they speak about peace, what peace means is you're taking all those little threads, all those little fragments of yourself, the person you are at work, the person you display on Sunday, the person you are when you go to the coffee shop, person you are with your dog, all of that, and then you weave it together into a whole. That's peace. And that's connected to the word salvation. So And what does it mean to be saved? Well, it means you are a complete restored soul. That's what we're talking about. And so when we're being reactive, we're not whole. And so what tends to happen is we do one of two things. We either get big and we're going to try to fix it. Like, I have the answer. I know what to do here. We want to get big. Well, when you get big like that, what you're ignoring is that God is with you. And if God's with you, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to fix it. And things are out of control. Yeah. What exactly do you have control over? Exactly. Are you going to control your kid? How are you going to do that? What are you going to do? Are you going to put tape over their mouth and only let them answer whenever they write down their answer, and then you edit? And then what are you going to do? Are you going to control the traffic? You're going to control the what? What exactly do you control? So, control, I often say, is my favorite illusion, and then that's one reaction. Another reaction to anxiety is we go small. And when we go small, we say things like, I don't really know if I really have a voice. I don't really think I should say anything. I don't really think I can do anything. It's just, we're just so overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, in that scenario too, you're also ignoring God. You think that maybe God isn't around, that maybe the real spiritual activity is happening somewhere else. Maybe he could just care less, right? But that's not true. God is there. And so I have a voice. I can say, hey, what you did hurt. Or I can say, hey, I have a doubt. Or I can just walk off. I don't have to be present in the middle of all this conflict. I don't have to fix it. And that's okay. That's okay. So those are some various things that you can do and kind of coming to grips with reactivity and trying to understand it a little bit.
Yeah, very helpful. And we will explore a little bit more toward the end, more kind of practical ways, and we'll get kind of into that side of things, help people navigate that. I did want to talk about the tendency to go big, like you mentioned. I mean, we're in an environment, in a culture right now where we are seeing a lot of Christians and Christian leaders specifically desire power and desire control over certain aspects of society. And, if we can just get the right people in the right places, if everybody was going to be able to, if everybody can read their Bible, if everybody can do X, Y, Z, then we won't have anything to fear. Everything will be good and dandy, and, we'll be safe. And, that's a thing that pops up in election cycles, but it pops up in all sorts of different areas. Can you talk about that and like how that kind of thinking distracts us from the important things, and how that is not maybe the best way to react to this issue?
Yeah, that's, man, yeah. I mean, I don't know how many articles, news and such that are out there about, all the downfall of a lot of church ministers that are out there. People that, one of the ones that really got to me was a couple of years ago was Ravi Zacharias. Here he is, this guy, speaker, and everybody thought he was so intelligent in all these books, and he's this great apologist for the faith. So many people looked up to him, and then just come to find out, oh, wait a minute, like for a very long time, you've been abusing women. You've been like totally using your position of power to manipulate. And it's not just him, like there's so many of those stories now, where all of this has gone on, and it's caused a lot of people to be like, what, hey, what's going on with all of that? Why are we experiencing all these things? And I think it's a couple of things. I think the church in general, I think when we talk about outreach, we're going to go outreach for people. When we think about we're trying to fulfill the Great Commission, we think that like we're showing up to save those people. And I think when you approach people with that kind of manner, like I'm here to save you, well, you're big. You think you're coming in with all the answers, and you haven't even listened to these people. You don't really know what they want. You don't know what they need. You don't know maybe they already believe in God. Paul has to go up to Mars Hill, and he's walking around. And he's like, "You guys already got a lot of stuff going on." He paid attention to what was around him. I think where Christians go wrong a lot of times is we think we're walking in to save somebody, and it comes across as very arrogant. I think Stanley Hauerwas, one of my favorite theologians, talks often about how, like, one of the things that's built into Christianity that you have to be careful of is you can really easily get a superiority complex. It's really easy to get self-righteous, which again is getting big. When you get big, you get self-righteous, and again, which is another form of control. I'm going to control you because I'm going to be hey, look, I know what your problem is. You're just a sinner bound for hell. That's your problem. And if you would just acknowledge that I'm right, we got this figured out, pal. I mean, we know how to solve this problem. And when you approach people that way, it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work at all. It really does a lot of damage. It does a lot of harm. It causes a lot of trauma in the lives of people when you approach people that way. So one thing you could do in that scenario would be like, okay, let's take a deep breath. If God is already at work, if I believe that God is everywhere, then God is maybe already at work in that person's life. And instead of coming in thinking, oh, I'm just going to save you, well, maybe I could find out what's going on in your world. Well, what's happening with you? And that's usually what we don't want to do. Just a little while ago, well, not a while ago, it was a couple of weeks ago, I visited campus of one of those large, mega church type things. And the little campus pastor guy came out. He was talking about how several weeks ago they had gone to go do like a community service project. And they show up to do this community service project. And one of the people that lived there came out and was like, "What are you guys doing?" And he thought, "Oh, this is my moment. I'm going to tell you about Jesus. I'm going to save you." And he began to explain that, we just believe in sharing the love of Jesus with people. And the lady kind of went off on him and was like, if you would have came by and asked us, what we really needed was some food. We already believe in God. But all this other stuff you're doing just isn't helpful. And I think that's kind of where we go wrong, especially when it comes to politics. Oh man, we could be on that one all day. But in that scenario, for example, here in Oklahoma, up in Tulsa, there's a group called the City Elders, and they believe that as Christians, that they are supposed to have dominion over certain things, and they have set themselves up as sort of like an ad hoc kind of power group, where if you want to get certain things done in Tulsa, you got to run it through them. Well, I don't see that happening in Scripture. I don't see where Jesus said to do that. I don't see where Paul talked about that. I don't see where the word dominion is supposed to be used by us Christians to have, power over others. It seems to me like Jesus gave that up and told his followers to do that. And so that action of dominion and trying to have a power play over others, that's another form of reactivity. You're just trying to control.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I don't think we think a lot about. I mean, one way my mind went from what you were talking was thinking of how much theology does influence our behavior. And sometimes Christians are weird about really separating those, We just gotta, somehow we don't need to get into all the theology and the thinking. We can just behave X, Y, Z. But you're showing how, there's this way the way we think really affects the way we're living out in this world. And when we have this bad thinking and think that power looks like this and dominion looks like this, then we're going to get off track, 7 ways to Sunday kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I appreciate a lot about this reframing you're trying to help us out with.
Yeah. Well, here's another little reframing. So if you're a Christian that believes in the rapture, right? So the rapture is this idea that there's going to be this point in time where God's going to come back, and when he comes back, he ain't going to be happy. And he's going to take all this stuff out, and all kinds of calamities are going to befall us. This is going to be, and then all the Christians get to leave. We're all going to hit the eject button. We're out of here. See you later, Earth. Whatever. The Earth is going to blow up. All this stuff. So if that's what you think, that if that's your theology of how things are going to go down, right? Well, then that leads to a lot of how you treat people. Yes. If you think God is the great judge coming down to like judge everybody, well, then you think you should be a judge. I should go out and judge others. If you think that this planet is going to blow up, well, then why do I need to fuss over anything? God's got it. Let's just get out of here. Whereas it seems to me like Jesus is inviting us into participation, into like, hey, help me create the kingdom. Help me do that. Disciples go to Jesus here like one time and they're like, hey, we'd really like to know how to pray. So he offers up what we call the Lord's Prayer. Part of that prayer is, your will done on earth as it is in heaven. And it seems to me that would be a great thing for a lot of Christians to ruminate. What does it mean to be an answer to that prayer? What does it mean to do God's will here on earth like it was in heaven? And I think that would be a great start to not trying to be controlling, but instead recognizing God is present, God is with me, and how might I participate in what's going on around me instead of trying to control it.
Well, I think it's appropriate to now move to that part of the show where we really get more practical. So, I mean, for people who are dealing with these issues, they really like control. Maybe they have a lot of that experience of fear. How can we kind of loosen the grip of those desires on us? Big, small, somewhere in between. Where are we supposed to land, and how can we get to that better relationship with control and fear and anxiety?
Yeah. I think one thing that would be helpful is just recognizing that we're not stuck, to use a sci-fi term. I think a lot of us walk around thinking that we are, that somehow we're that we're this logical, rational person that every now and then has a few emotions. And when those emotions pop up, we're just not really sure what to do with it. Oh my gosh, what do I do with that? We're just not really sure. I would submit to you that we're a human being. And as a human being, you have a ton of emotions, and every now and then you have a few thoughts. That's kind of how it works. But for most of us, we have been, especially men in our society, little boys aren't allowed to cry, but they're allowed to get angry, right? So what's up with that? So for most men, you talk about emotions, and we don't know what that is. I either feel nothing or I'm angry. Whereas women in our culture have been encouraged to feel all the feels and do all the things and blah, blah, blah. But when you look at scripture, Jesus wept and he was cool with it. Jesus had emotions. He looked down and he saw the people, and he's moved deeply by the things that he sees, like emotion deep down in, like this is a big deal for him. And so I would say, for one thing, to help you deal with your anxiety is get in touch with the fact that you're a human being. You're not God. And you don't have to figure everybody's everything little out. Start here. Start right here. What is going on with you? Pay attention to that. When you're driving in traffic, why do you got to go 85 miles an hour? What's going on there? When you're in the checkout line, why are you getting so hacked off that you just have to stand in line a little longer? What's going on with that? Why are you so angry when your kid forgot to put their shoes in the closet and you're like losing your ever-loving mind? Pay attention to yourself. What is going on? Start right here. What is this? What's going on right here? Why is that? And so that, I would say that's a good place to start. Start right here, paying attention to what's going on with you. For some people, prayer can be helpful. That could be a super helpful tool. Another tool would be the Daily Examine. You can download that onto your phone for free. Ask you some questions to sort of get back in touch with yourself. Journaling can be super helpful. I would also tell you, if you can do it, go for a freaking walk. Get outside and take 10, 30 minutes. Just take a walk. um, let your mind just kind of wander for a while, and you'll see kind of the anxieties kind of come down.
Well, thank you. And for those on the audio, when he was saying start here, he was putting his hand on his heart, just to be clear on that. We can start from a place of looking inside of ourselves, start from that place. Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate all the wisdom you've given us. We're not quite done with you yet. If you want to, you can, send us to any places on the interwebs that you might be found, and people can look you up and see what you're doing or writing about, or, anything like that. So
Yeah, sure.
anything there? Yeah.
Anything? Yeah, sure. I have a little website. It just has some basic information on there, but it's bpsturtz.com. You can go there and you could find me that way. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Just look up Brian Sturtz. You'll find me there on LinkedIn. I have a little bit of a Substack that I'm trying to work on a little bit. I have the old school blogger site still that I
all right,
have a few things that I've written back in the day. I've written a few ideas and thoughts on some stuff out there. But yeah, I'm a couple places on the internet there.
Okay, perfect. Yes, absolutely. Big fan of Substack. Should do more with it. I like that platform. A lot of people that will be listening to this show probably be listening through our Substack there. But excellent. Now, we do have one last question for you that everybody gets on the show. This is where you can, hit the home run here. Give us this last piece of superb wisdom. So here's the question. As we close, leave the audience with just one practical action they can do this week to live out their faith fully for Jesus.
One practical thing you could do this week, I would suggest, would be to pay attention to the people around you and think of just one kind thing. In a world where we are so full of anxiety and conflict, kindness is refreshing. So open a door for somebody, help somebody get their groceries to their car. Just what's the one kind thing with whoever you might be around? The one kind thing for your kid, the one kind thing for your spouse, one kind thing for a coworker. What's the one thing?
Wonderful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Brian Sturtz, everyone. He has helped us with your background in ministry and chaplaincy, has helped us to really wrestle with these questions of control and hopefully move us to a better place where allegiance is on Jesus only and we don't get distracted by all the other craziness and let fear run our lives. So we are so appreciative of you. Now, for everybody else listening, I know you enjoyed this episode today, and so what I want you to do is, if you enjoyed this episode, or even if you were neutral to it, I want you to find out who your second cousin is and text or Facebook message this episode to your second cousin. That is your sharing challenge of the week. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Smashing Idols, and thank you so much, Brian, for bringing all this great stuff for us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the offer. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today to Smashing Idols. To learn more about the show and me, Jake Doberenz, head over to jakedoberenz.com and be sure to check us out on Substack. That's jakedoberenz.substack.com. There you can subscribe to this podcast, which comes out every Tuesday morning, and you can subscribe to the newsletter, also called Smashing Idols, which comes out on Friday morning, where I dive into these subjects in a short essay. You can follow me on Twitter and Threads and Instagram and all the places at Jake Doberenz. I'd love to continue the conversation there. All right, everybody, grab those hammers, get to smashing those idols.
Looking for fresh ideas to lead your church in today's changing world? Check out the Future Christian podcast. Each episode features pastors, authors, and faith leaders sharing practical wisdom on ministry, technology, and tackling challenges like pastoral burnout. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or passionate about your faith, we're here to inspire and equip you for impactful ministry. Listen now on your favorite podcast platform.